Well, thank you, everyone, and it's great to be here. It's actually such a pleasure to see so many at an English group. I've been involved about 8 or 9 years now in the Spiritist movement, and it's good to see we're growing. And this is, I think, one of the biggest groups I've talked to, so thank you for coming. And also, thank you for that amazing introduction. I'm going to rename my talk Call Me, after rather than the importance of relationship, but it really hits the spot, and I hope the message I bring today will bring home to you the importance of relationships in our lives. So, like I say, it's a pleasure and a privilege to be here. And the topic I've chosen, I told this topic, I thought it was very interesting, but I think hopefully you will find it interesting too. And it's the importance of relationships. Let's get my slides up here. There we go. I'm using the word relationship in the broadest possible sense here, okay? In the field of social psychology, relationships are defined as any association between people, persons, amounting to mutual familiarity, mutual awareness of one's and others' identities, and a meaningful understanding of the relationship to one another. It could be a chance encounter with a stranger. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Yeah. Chance encounter with a stranger made through a smile or a handshake, bond between a mother and a child, support of family and friends, which that film really brought out very clearly, or an intimate bond between partners, long-term partners, and these bonds can last not just this lifetime, but may extend in many, many lifetimes. But I'd like to start by going back to the fundamentals of Spiritism and briefly visit the key principles on which the Spiritist Doctrine is based. And many of us attend these open meetings. Some of us go to the classes. We read books at home, Kardec obviously, Andrea Louise, Joanna De Angelis, and so on. Maybe do the gospel at home. But I think periodically it's good to step back and remind ourselves, what are the fundamental principles of Spiritism? And what is the Spiritist doctrine and how it differs from other religious belief systems? So, firstly, we Spiritists believe in the existence of God, supreme intelligent, the first cause of all things, infinitely good and just. And learning to develop our relationship with God is the ultimate goal of our existence. And all our relationships are essential but secondary to reaching this primary goal. I'll return to the relationship with our Creator at the end of the talk, okay? Now, we all started our existence as simple and ignorant spirits, each of us having the inherent desire to evolve both intellectually and morally. Humankind is advancing, but at a diverse rate. With the resources of free will, some of us will make choices that will limit our progress, while others move forward in leaps and bounds, and with a clear understanding of the purpose and direction of this incarnate existence and our final destiny. The second pillar of Spiritism doctrine is that we're all immortal spirits, with souls having an incarnate experience rather than physical bodies with a soul. Upon death of the physical body, our spirit lives on, and after a shorter or maybe more extended period in the spiritual realm, we return to the material world to continue our intellectual and moral advancement. More importantly, we contribute to the progress of society and consequently become co-creators with God. And that brings us to the third and most important Spiritist principle, I think, the plurality of existences. In the word of Leon Denis from the book After Death, and I'm quoting him here, all the souls who haven't been able to get rid of their earthly influences will be reborn in this world in order to work on their improvement. That is the case of a huge majority, unfortunately. Just like the other phases of a being's life, reincarnation is ruled by laws, the perispirit's degree of pureness, the molecular affinity that determine the spirit's classification in space, also set the conditions for their reincarnation. And he continues, similar things are attracted to each other, and it is due to this law of attraction and harmony that results that the spirit of the same order, who present analogous character and tendencies, become close and follow one another throughout their multiple existences, incarnating together and constituting homogeneous families. This last part, that we reincarnate together over multiple existences, reaffirms the importance of relationships in our evolution. The spirits tell us, depending on our level of advancement, we eventually reach a level of evolvement that we become participants in our own reincarnation planning. We deliberately choose situations that provide difficult but doable challenges that offer the greatest learning experiences. Often the trials we face are to address imperfections embedded in our perispirit, created by misguided actions in the past. Simply put, this is the law of cause and effect in action. We must reincarnate in the flesh to learn to rid ourselves of the delights and the trappings of the flesh. We all must go through this material experience. Even the high-order spirits experience material life as simple and ignorant spirits like ourselves. But their ascendancy is such that they no longer have the need for further reincarnations. We too will all get there someday, and only we ourselves can decide when. Reincarnation is a principal tool leading to our intellectual and moral advancement and our final destination of perfection. Michelangelo used his chisel as a tool to work on his chosen medium, marble, to create his masterpiece of David. That's the statue, by the way, in the Basilica, not the David you see here before you, okay? An artist may choose a tool of paint and canvas to explore the medium of visible representation to express feelings. A performance artist may choose the tool of music to express emotions through the medium of music and dance. As the text of Léon Denis so insightfully explains, the tool of reincarnation is ineffective without interaction with others, particularly the family of spirits that create a homogeneous family. And we're going to explore this concept further when we go to the Spirits book and look at the law of society. But let's go back to the principles of Spiritism. The fourth fundamental principle is the plurality of worlds. And for those who have seen the recent film about the life of Kardec, I assume most of us here have seen that film, we can now appreciate the challenges that he faced when he published that first edition back in 1857. At that time, the field of cosmology was in its infancy, telescopes rudimentary, and there was little or no knowledge of planets beyond our own solar system, let alone the expanse of the Milky Way, our own, and other galaxies beyond. Today we know our galaxy contains 100 billion stars, and the known universe, maybe other further out that we're not able to see yet, approximately 200 billion galaxies. So virtually all scientists agree that the probability of light outside planet Earth, even though we have zero evidence, right? Zero evidence, is 100%. And again, Kardec was saying this 160 years ago. And finally, to the fifth and final, the last principle, the communicability between spirits. Without communication between the two realms of existence, we wouldn't have the Spiritist codification and consequently the Spiritist Doctrine. Without the communication between spirits, we wouldn't be meeting here today. So by the way, I talking about these five fundamentals of Spiritism, I've got to give credit to Andrea Marcello's video, Andrea Marcello Neto, I'm sure you know very well. What is Spiritism? It's a 5-minute video. That's where I basically took the theme of that introduction. And I recommend seeing it if you haven't seen it. If you have seen it, see it again, because it just brings you back to the grounds you as to what is Spiritism is all about. So following on from this last fundamental principle of Spiritism, the communicability between spirits, I want to turn to the bedrock of Spiritism, which of course is the Spirits book. And in the third part, Kardec organizes the responses to over 300 questions and groups the answers into separate chapters, each focusing on the moral laws. And that whole section 3 becomes later on the gospel, according to Spiritism. But in particular, in chapter 7, Kardec explores with the Spirit's mentors the human need for societal law, the repercussions of living in isolation, and the vow of silence, and finally family ties and how humans differ from animals. So let's go through some of these questions because it's so important to the topic we're talking about today. So the first question in 766 is societal life natural? And the Spirit's answer is certainly. God has made humans for living in society. Otherwise, it would have been needless for God to have endowed them with speech and all the other faculties necessary for a life of relationships. And the Spirits make 2 points here. First, that humans are made for living in society. We're made for living in society. And he goes on to explore that deeper in the subsequent questions. But secondly, we are endowed with speech and all the other faculties. What do the Spirits mean by all these other faculties? Obviously, the sense of hearing and touch come to mind. Undoubtedly, we underutilize these senses in our interactions with others. Particularly, how many relationships suffer because of the inability of one party simply to listen to the other? But I believe when the Spirits talk of human faculties, it's in a much broader context. Encompasses concepts beyond the 5 senses. These are the traits that make us particularly human and distinguish us from the other animal species. They include empathy, kindness, patience, charity, and of course love, to name a few. In question 767, Kardec asks, is absolute isolation contrary to the law of nature? And again, typical of Kardec, it's virtually the inverse of the question he just previously asked. And the response is yes, because people instinctively seek out societal living, and because all of them must cooperate in humankind's progress by mutually helping one another. And this response is central to the message today. We instinctively seek out societal living, and we must cooperate in humankind's progress by mutually helping one another. In contemplating this instinct of societal living, I remember the film Castaway. Do you remember the film Castaway? You remember that film? Yeah, good. Tom Hanks, right. It's 20 years ago, actually. And if you may recall, Hanks plays the role of a FedEx executive, survives a crash of a cargo plane in the middle of the Pacific, and ends up on a tropical island all on his own. And so obviously struggles to find the necessity of life, food, clothing, shelter, etc. But he was very tenacious. And he finds resources washed up on the shore from the plane, lots of FedEx boxes, amazing things. And he finds, amongst all the boxes, a Wilson brand volleyball. So one day he was trying to create a fire, and he slips and badly cuts his hand, and in frustration he picks up the volleyball and throws it as far as his limited strength would allow. And then a few days later, he sees, let me find the microphone where I am here. I'm sorry, I got a bit ahead of myself. There we are. He sees the bloody imprint of his hand. It resembles a face. So he takes it back to his shelter and starts conversing with the ball. And over time, he develops a close and personal relationship with this ball, and naturally calls him Wilson. The relationship helps him keep his sanity and his hope in his isolation. In a way, without realizing it, Wilson became his guardian angel. Now, Castaway is just a fictional Hollywood movie, but it does illustrate this basic human need we all have to have connections with others, even through a proxy, in this case, Wilson the volleyball. And this fact is further clarified in question 768, when Kardec asks, in seeking societal living, do people obey a personal sentiment, or is there a wider providential purpose involved? And the answer we get is humans must progress. They cannot do so alone. However, since they do not possess every faculty, again the word faculty, they need contact with others. In isolation, they become brutish and withered. And finally, Kardec ends by adding his own comments. He says that no single individual possesses the complete range of faculties, again this word faculties, is through social union that individuals complete one another. Social union that we complete one another in order to ensure their own welfare and progress. Because they need one another. They have been created to live in society, not in isolation. And again, he emphasized the need to complete our faculties and how individuals, through interactions with one another and society, are instrumental in reaching these goals. In the next part of the chapter, Kardec addresses the question of isolation and vows of silence. And I particularly like this response here. God cannot consider as pleasing a life in which a person condemns themselves to being useless to everyone. That's an amazing thing. It's not as if you're depriving yourself, but you're depriving others the opportunity to learn. And that's the point he's making. We have a function not just for ourselves, but to others. And finally, in the last part of the chapter on the law of society, he talks about family ties. And I've got a little out of sync here, okay. Let's see where I am. The vow of absolute silence, like the vow of isolation, deprives individual of the societal relationships that can furnish them with the opportunities to do good and fulfill the laws. Very important. And then the last part, he talks about family ties. Here we go. And Kardec explores the differences between humans and animals. And I find this very fascinating. I mean, we all evolved from animals, but why and where's the distinction? And spirits tell us that animals live a material life, not a moral life. A mother's tenderness for her young has at its principle the instinct of preservation regarding the beings born to her. When these beings take care of themselves, her task is fulfilled, and nature requires no more of her. Thus, she abandons them in order to occupy herself with more newborns. And finally, Kardec ends the chapter with this. He says, human beings have a different destiny to that of the animals. For humans, there is something beyond physical need. There's the need for progress. Societal ties are necessary for progress, and family ties are summed up in social ties. Hence, family ties are a law of nature. God has thus willed that humans learn to love one another as brothers and sisters. However, humans are not alone in their ability. I've skipped ahead of myself here, my apologies. Okay. Humans are not alone in our ability to live in extended communities, constantly interacting and supporting one another. In the animal kingdom, there are countless examples of communication and cooperation on a mammoth scale. In the insect world, ants and bees build communities with industry and purpose, resulting in cities of anthills and beehives, constantly expand over generation, often spurring separation and start of a new colonies to repeat the process over again. But the 2 points I want to make here, the communities with large number of individuals are based on very inflexible relationships. A worker ant will always be just that, and the queen bee is able to create offspring. Their combined function is survival of the species and nothing more, and the process has been going on for millions of years. On the other hand, our nearest cousins, the chimpanzees, can form closer bonds, demonstrating flexibility in their relationships with other members of the group. They are sensitive to the needs and care for each other, sharing child rearing responsibilities, demonstrate tenderness through mutual grooming. There is, however, a strict hierarchy and under the control of the alpha male. The groups rarely exceed 100 individuals, so in times of plenty, when climate and food sources are favorable, the group grows beyond the critical points, separates, and division occurs. So what makes us different? We've only been in existence perhaps for maybe human race, the Homo sapiens, maybe 300,000 years, but only 70,000 years in terms of since we started to develop our cognitive abilities. So what makes us different? And it's basically our ability to cooperate both flexibly and in large numbers. And it's led to the total domination of all of the species on Earth, including our Homo cousins, the Neanderthals. So let's go back to the sphere of human relationships and how those human relationships progress through our material existence. The first and most important relationship we have is with ourselves. The eminent psychoanalyst Carl Jung established that the unconscious is like an iceberg, with only the visible part, 5%, being the air of consciousness. According to Joanna De Angelis in the book Life, Challenges and Solutions, available in English, excellent book, it is very difficult for the unconscious mind to be dissociated from the different manifestations of human life. For it is very powerful, dictates the events that comprise his life's impulses and activisms. And she goes on to say, nevertheless, we must bear in mind the presence of the spirit, which transcends effects and begins to exercise its function as the unconscious, the real reservoir of all the individual's experience on the long, and I love this word, anthrosocio-psychological journey that he or she has inherited from successive reincarnations. But the spirits tell us that the most of the suffering in our incarnate life, be it physical, manifesting in pain or illness, psychological, manifesting in mental disorders, are the results of past actions in the current life, albeit that the cause, more often than not, is hidden in the unconsciousness. It's estimated we have 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. Think of that. 3,000 an hour, 50 a minute, but 1 a second, assuming we have thoughts when we sleep, and we do. So most of our thoughts are negative. I'm too fat. I'm lazy. I need to go to the gym more. She doesn't like me. I'm not good enough. And on and on. It is in the unconscious mind that we find the presence of the spirit in the folds of the inner being. Again, this is Joanna De Angelis. Impregnated with memories that do not reach the current consciousness and yet affect behavior indirectly, causing disquieting and unfamiliar states with the structure of the ego. Self-identification, self-discovery, enables individuals to grasp the need for progress, while at the same time it disarticulates the difficulties that have been formed by negative past life experiences, the vestiges of which we continue to cause problems. In question 919 of the Spirit books, and this is perhaps one of the most well-known questions apart from the first question, Kardec asks, what is the most effective means of improving ourselves in this life and for resisting the attraction of wrongdoing? Anybody know the answer? No? What is the most effective means for improving ourselves in this life? A sage in antiquity told you, know thyself. Okay? It is the inspiring message to this question. And then St. Augustine tells us this. Those who every night will recall all their actions during the day and would ask themselves what good or wrongdoing they have done, praying to God and their guardian angel to enlighten them, would acquire great strength for self-improvement, because self-improvement, believe me, God will assist them. Therefore, ask yourselves about what you have done and towards what aim you acted in a particular circumstance. Whether you've done anything that you would blame in others, whether you have done anything that we would not dare profess. And he goes on. Self-knowledge is therefore the key to individual improvement. But you will ask, how do we judge ourselves? Won't we be under the illusion of vanity, which exalts our wrong and makes them excusable? And he goes on to say, when you are indecisive as to the quality of any one of your actions, ask how you would judge it if it had been done by someone else. If you would blame it on another, it cannot be any more legitimate for you. For God does not use two measures for justice. Also, seek to know what others think about you, and do not neglect the opinion of your enemies. That's an interesting one, eh? Ask your enemies, because they have no interest in disguising the truth. And hereby lies the key to self-identification, self-discovery, self-enlightenment. It is through our connections, interactions, and relationship with others that we advance on this path to inner transformation. So much of our unconscious self is revealed to us through our relationship with others. Our thoughts, More importantly, our feelings about others are so often a simple projection of ourselves. Psychological projection is described as a defense mechanism in which the human ego defends itself against unconscious impulses or qualities, both positive and negative, by denying their existence in themselves while attributing to others. Let me rearrange here. Excuse this a second. Where am I? When we point our finger at someone else, right, we point 3 back this way. For example, the recurring thought is, I'm too fat, may manifest itself by projecting to someone else with a thought, gosh, hasn't so-and-so put on so much weight? You know? Another example is the anxiety and tension we often feel around others. It can be a reflection of the way we perceive ourselves. When we are insecure, have lower self-esteem, it is common to perceive the problem as being with the other person, not ourselves. Classic form of projection is common amongst those suffering from social anxiety. Now, I could spend the whole of the talk, if not a whole seminar, exploring the field of projection psychology and the insight it provides us to understanding our relationship with others, but more importantly, the relationship with ourselves. However, I hope this very superficial and pretty naive overview will inspire you to study further. When I was preparing for this talk, I came across an excellent video. In fact, it was Fatima, my wife, who came across it. It's called The Shadow Effect. The Shadow Effect. It's available on YouTube. Excellent video. I learned so much from that video. It talks about basically this whole projection psychology. It's about an hour, but it really gives some good insights. And there's a lot of parallels with Spiritism as well. Okay, so knowing oneself is the foundation of any meaningful relationship. Relationships encompass all forms of connection, interaction, and exchange with others. We live our lives in concentric spheres of relationships, starting with ourselves and radiating out, but finally ending up back in ourselves with the most important relationship of all, and that is with our Creator. The list is sequential here, starting with the first realization of self as an infant, and ending up in the inevitable death of the physical body, and continuation in the spiritual realm. But early on in our incarnate existence, an individual will nurture multiple relationships simultaneously, many individuals from all types of associations. Actually, last month I was reminded of just how many personal connections one accumulates during a lifetime when my daughter got married. We rented a beautiful location in Broward. It's called Secret Woods. It's in the mangrove swamps. Beautiful building. And the bad news was the room could only hold 80 guests maximum. Actually, that was the good news too, because if it'd been more, I'd be still paying till the end of my lifetime. But anyway, but we know that the couple had not 4 parents, but 7 parents, because they had 3 step-parents. The groom had 12 aunts and uncles and 26 cousins. The bride had a family of friends in Australia, England, Brazil, not to mention friends, co-workers, etc., etc. Believe me, getting down to 80 guests was quite a challenge. But how does one maintain so many meaningful and healthy relationships? Again, I'd like to turn to the book of Joanna de Angelis, and she starts off chapter 9 by saying, human beings cannot live without the harmony of their social group. Gregarious animals, they are nourished by the energy and presence of others like them, who stimulate them to advance in their quest for self-realization. The social relationships is of a major importance for developing the qualities that lie in the folds of the unconsciousness, awaiting stimuli to bring them to the surface. This is possible only by living with persons of the same ilk. As they live their lives with others, human beings smooth out their rough inner edges and adapt to their group. They learn that complete attunement to others results in productivity and the moral growth of society. Their own growth is growth for everybody. Their own failure is a collective failure. In this endeavor, therefore, they discover the beauty and harmony, which is the result oneness with everyone else in the group. Again, this is from the book Life Challenges and Solutions by Joanna Janis. Very good book. Unlike her other books, it's quite readable. Not too much psychology, but I could understand it anyway. But I'd like to come to the end and talk a bit about where I started this talk, and our relationship with God, the Creator. The first question, as we all know, of the Spirit book is, what is God? And the answer we get is that God is the supreme intelligence, the first cause of all things, infinitely good and just. And I confess, I'm still uncomfortable when I talk of God and what the concept of God really means to me. I spent most of my life as an agnostic. It's only when I got involved in Spiritism 8 years ago that I started to really... I was always looking for something. But I still have a little difficulty in really what is my connection with God. And I want to throw this out to you for you to think about it and analyze what is your connection and your relationship with God. Even the many attributes that describe God, eternal. Lost my page. Excuse me a second. Getting rather messy here. There we go. Eternal, infinite, immutable, immaterial, one, all-powerful. It doesn't really help to understand. But I do take, great solace from question 11 of the Spirits book, when the Spirits explain, when spirits are no longer eclipsed by matter, and when they have finally purified themselves enough to be able to approach God, then they will see and comprehend God. So we all know we're still very, very low in the pecking order of our spiritual enlightenment. But wherever we are, we each of us find our own relationship with God and establish our own personal comfort zone. For me, God, or God, is the grand organizing designer. And although it will be many, many incarnations before I'll be able to get truly close and personal, at least I understand what I need to do. It's like working for this huge multinational company where the CEO is so many levels removed that I haven't even got a picture of him. However, like all major corporations, there is a mission statement to guide all the employees in the same direction so that everyone is aligned to the same goal. I remember back in my corporate days, I worked for Johnson & Johnson for many years. And the company placed a lot of emphasis on its mission statement. They called it the credo. And unlike major corporations, it placed the shareholders in the last place. Being a company built on healthcare, first priority was always focused on the patients, doctors, nurses, and mothers who use the products. I lost my page again. Sorry about that. Oh boy. See if I can remember. Anyway, so the second one was, the first one was to the people who use the products. The second was the employees. The third was to the environment and the communities in which they work. And the idea being that the fourth one was the shareholders. But if you did the first three right, the shareholders would get a fair return. And it worked very well. The company is still in existence 130 years later, one of the biggest multinationals in the world. But going back to the mission statement of Spiritism, when we talk about God, it's very, very simple. It's even simpler than the J&J Credo. And it's basically just two words, and that's loving unconditionally. And that is our mission statement. So no matter what our connection is with God, as long as we have that mission statement in mind and we work at our relationship with others, we will all get there one day. So I'd like to end with just sharing with you a beautiful poem. Boy, I'm having technical difficulties here, and I haven't got it written down. I have got it written down somewhere. Well, it's a beautiful poem by an Indian poet called Rumi. Let's see if we can bring it up. There we go. It's called the guest house. This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them all at the door, laughing, and invite them all in. Be grateful, whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So with that, I would like to end the talk. Thank you for your patience, and wish you all healthy relationships. Thank you. Just by the way, going back to to the film Castaway, he eventually, of course, it takes him 5 years to get off the island. But there's some nice parallels in the end of the story about relationships. He finally gets off the island. He's always food runs out, his water runs out. He's almost unconscious. He loses Wilson overboard, and that was his last hope. But he gets rescued, and eventually goes back to the city in Missouri, I think it was, where he was FedEx, and he was very much welcomed. But then he finds out his wife had given him up for dead, and she remarried, had a little girl, and they meet, and they realize their relationship was still as strong as ever, but circumstances were different. And the last scene of the film, if I recall, he still had one FedEx box intact from the shipwreck, and he finds the address, and he drives to the house. There was nobody there, and he leaves the box on the doorstep. And then he was driving back, and he came to a crossroad, right? And he sees a van coming, and this very pretty lady said, "Oh, can I help you?" And he said, I don't know where I'm going, but, you know. And he noticed on the van the same trademark as on the box that he left at that house. Wing, right? Sorry? I can't recall the actual, yeah. But anyway, the message is that, life is still open to new relationships. And it reminds me of in No Solar, right? Andre Louise goes back after and he finds his wife remarried. So anyway, just another tie in there. Okay, thank you very much.